Hi boys and girls, welcome to the second video. We are still focusing on that you can produce clear writing where the reader can understand the purpose. And remember that you are writing research papers about the ancient civilization that you chose, and we want the reader to be able to read that and learn a lot about your civilization that you chose. We're also drafting and editing, so I'm gonna show you examples of my draft. So make sure that you are drafting a rough draft, not just typing it up for the first time and that's it. There's certainly a lot that you can fix after you do that first draft. Okay, so, and don't forget, I want to remind you that this Friday you will have to turn something in. Okay, so last week you didn't have to turn anything in, but this Friday your multi-paragraph essay will be due by this Friday. So we're working you up to that. So you will have something to turn in. Okay, so I showed you my introduction yesterday. We talked about how it had the main idea sentence, and then it had the three subtopics in there. Now I'm going to show you how I take one of those subtopics. Okay, the first one I mentioned was writing in my introduction paragraph. So let's take that, and I'm going to show you how I turned that all into a paragraph. Notice, just like I did up here, you need to indent. On a computer, you can hit the tab button or hit the space button 6 times, but make sure that you indent. This tells the reader that this is a new paragraph. I kind of switched gears here. This is a new topic within my paper, and that gives the reader kind of a break with their eyes to know that they're going to switch to something a little different, okay? So make sure that you are indenting too when you switch to a new paragraph. Okay, so I looked off of my notes, and I've got my notes back here, and I read all of the notes that I had, and sometimes I went in order because a lot of times it made sense to go in order because the way that I wrote it down is when I found it in my research. And in their paper, they went in a good order. So a lot of times I did go in order with how I had it written down, but not always. Sometimes I switched it up a little bit because I said, I think it makes sense to say this first. So just look at your notes and decide what you want to mention first in the paragraph, and just take that off of your notes and put it into your paragraph. In your notes, a lot of times you didn't do complete sentences. Make sure in your paper that you do switch it to sentences. Okay, so let me show you. In my first subtopic paragraph, I wrote all about their writing. Okay, and I started with the main idea sentence, and I said the Maya had one of the most advanced systems of writing and numbers. Okay, so that's what this whole paragraph is about. It's about their advanced system of writing. So that's what I led with. That was my introduction sentence. Yeah. And then I said they used hieroglyphics that looked... Avrian. Sorry, I had to tell my son to quiet down. That looked similar to what the ancient Egyptians used. The writing was comprised of over 800 symbols. Now this came straight from my notes. See the first two parts I had that it was an advanced system of writing in numbers, and that second part was about the hieroglyphics. And I shortened it. I just said 800 symbols is all I wrote, but I turned these into sentences on my rough draft. I ended up taking out that next part about they only had only priests and wealthy Mayans were the ones who learned to read and write. I had a lot of facts here, and I didn't think that matched up well with the main idea of this, that they had an advanced system of writing. I don't think that really described that and fit well there, so I ended up taking that out. And that's okay. You can take something out. You don't have to add everything that's in your notes. Okay, so the next sentence, they even made foldable books out of bark called codices. Unfortunately, the Spanish burned most of them during the conquest because they thought the books to be evil. Okay, so you can see how I took my notes and I changed this into a paragraph. You might notice that I changed the wording around some. And that's a good idea for you to do that as well, it's called paraphrasing, because you don't want the words to sound exactly like the research papers that you read, like the book that you read in Epic and the articles that you found on Duckster.com and the videos. You want to change the wording around and paraphrase, make it your own words. If you use the exact words from someone else's paper, then that would be plagiarism. So you've got to be careful to change the words around and make them your words. You can use exact words sometimes, but make sure you put quotation marks around it to tell the reader, I got this from what somebody else wrote. Somebody else wrote this, not me. Okay? And then you would have to put the source right next to it when you do that. Okay, so let's move on to the next paragraph. And the next subtopic, if you look back here in my introduction, the next one I mentioned in my introduction was the government. So let me show you my paragraph about the government. Again, I indented. Make sure that you are indenting. The Maya people had a very strong and strict government. So that was my main idea sentence there for that paragraph. It's all about how their government was a very strong, structured government. So that's what I said for my first sentence. And then I went on. Oh, and let me go to my notes for this one. So you can see that I took this off of my notes and turned this into a paragraph. So I went on to the next sentence and I said, they had a government similar to the ancient Greeks, which was also later adopted by our own government. Now, that was actually something that I didn't have in my notes, but I remember reading about that and I looked it back up and I thought that's really important, I think, for this paragraph to talk about how, their government was emulated by other governments. Other governments adopted it and used it. It shows kind of how important and how strong of a government they had. So I didn't have that in my notes, but it's something that I remembered reading about and I wanted to add that. So that's something you can do as well. You don't have to just go off what's in your notes. You can add more to it as you're drafting out your paper. Okay, the next sentence. Each city-state had its own independent government. Each city-state also had a king. It was believed that the kings were given the right to rule by gods. The Maya people had strict laws and were often punished by death for murder, arson, and acts against the gods. Punishments were carried out immediately because they had no prisons. They were either sentenced to death, slavery, or fines. Okay, so in this one too, I also took out some of the notes. I didn't add everything in that paragraph. I actually ended up taking out how local leaders, nobles, or kings would be the judge. I didn't think that was really important to show how strong their government was, which was my main idea for this paragraph. So I took that part out. All right, let's move on to the next subtopic paragraph. The next one that I mentioned in my introduction, let's go back to it and look really quick. Remember, the next one that I had mentioned was about the ball game. I told you that was the one that I had the most trouble with, connecting that to how the Maya were advanced people. And that is my last subtopic paragraph. Okay, so I indented again, and make sure that you're doing that. And my first sentence was, the Maya people played a game called the ball game that was centered to their culture and city. Okay, so that's my introduction sentence for that paragraph. I'm introducing what the whole paragraph is going to be about. It's about the ball game. And then I go on using my notes to make this all into a paragraph. It was also a symbol of their wealth and power. The object of the game was getting a rubber ball through a small hoop high up on the wall, using only their hips, knees, and elbows. The first team to get the ball through the hoop would win, but it was so difficult. It would sometimes take weeks. The losers were often sacrificed to the gods. Okay, so that was the end of my third subtopic paragraph. You can do this too. Take those 3 subtopics that you decided on, look at your notes, and turn those into subtopic paragraphs. And on the next video, I will be showing you what my conclusion looks like. Thank you. See you next time.